The bitter taste of almonds in my iced tea was the only warning I received before my world tilted on its axis. It wasn't the sweet, artificial flavor of amaretto, but something sharper, metallic, a taste that set off an alarm bell deep within my reptilian brain, a survival instinct I hadn't needed since I was a young woman navigating the cutthroat jazz clubs of the French Quarter. I was sitting at the Gilded Lily, one of New Orleans' most prestigious courtyard restaurants, surrounded by the scent of blooming jasmine and the murmur of polite society. Yet I had never been closer to death. If you are reading this, if you are looking for a sign that the monsters under the bed are sometimes the people sleeping down the hall, then stay with me. This isn't just a story about survival. It is a testimony to the fact that dignity is not a gift given by others, but a fortress you must defend yourself. It was a humid Tuesday in late April. My daughter-in-law, Serena, had insisted on this lunch. She claimed we needed to bond, to bridge the widening chasm that had opened between us since she and my son, Julian, had moved into my Garden District estate 6 months prior. I didn't want to come. I felt a pervasive heaviness in my chest whenever I was around her, a sense of dread that I had foolishly attributed to grief over the loss of my husband, Marcus, 3 years ago. I wore my emerald silk blouse, the one Marcus loved because it brought out the green in my eyes, and my grandmother's diamond studs. I wanted to project strength. I arrived early, taking a seat by the fountain, watching the koi fish dart through the water, trying to steady my trembling hands. Serena arrived 20 minutes late, a calculated power move she employed often. She was a vision of modern efficiency in a sharp navy blazer and tailored trousers, her blonde hair sprayed into an immobile helmet of perfection. She kissed my cheek, and her lips felt like dry parchment. We ordered. She chose a kale salad. I ordered the crawfish étouffée because, at 72, I refused to deny myself the pleasures of our local cuisine. We made small talk about the humidity and the upcoming termite swarm season. Then, her phone buzzed. She feigned annoyance, apologized, and stepped away toward the hostess stand to take the call. That was when I took a sip of my tea. That was when the woman at the next table saved my life. I had barely swallowed the first mouthful when a hand gripped my wrist with surprising strength. I turned to see a woman in her late 60s, her face lined with the kind of wisdom that comes from seeing too much darkness. She had short, steel-gray hair and wore a heavy silver bracelet. Her eyes were terrified. "Don't drink another drop," she hissed, her voice a low tremor that barely carried over the sound of the fountain. I stared at her, confused. "Excuse me?" She leaned in closer, her eyes darting toward the hostess stand where Serena was pacing. "I am a retired forensic toxicologist," she whispered rapidly. I watched her. "When you were looking at the menu, she poured a vial of clear liquid into your glass. I saw the viscosity. It wasn't sweetener. Listen to me carefully. You need to leave. Now." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Surely you're mistaken," I stammered. "That's my daughter-in-law." The woman squeezed my wrist harder. "I know what I saw. Do not go back to that table. Go to the ladies' room. There is a service exit through the kitchen hallway. Run." The urgency in her eyes shattered my denial. I looked at the glass. The ice was melting, swirling with a substance that seemed slightly denser than the tea. I looked at Serena. She was watching me from across the room, her back turned, but her posture tense, like a predator waiting for the trap to snap. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, flooded my system. I stood up. My knees were water. I walked toward the restroom, feeling Serena's gaze burning into my back. I pushed through the heavy oak door, locked it, and saw the service corridor the stranger had mentioned. I didn't hesitate. At 72, with arthritis in my hips, I moved with a speed I didn't know I possessed. I burst out into the alleyway, the smell of rotting vegetables and stale beer hitting me like a physical blow, and I ran. I hailed a cab on Decatur Street, my breath coming in ragged gasps, and gave the driver the address of my sister, Matilda. As the taxi pulled away, I saw Serena emerge from the restaurant, scanning the street with a look of feral panic. That was the moment the blindfold fell away. My son's wife hadn't just been rude to me. She hadn't just been impatient. She had tried to kill me. And the most devastating realization, the one that made me weep silently in the back seat of that cab, was that I knew exactly why. To understand the depth of this betrayal, I have to take you back 6 months, to the day I opened the heavy iron gates of Beauregard Manor to the wolves. It had been 3 years since Marcus died, leaving me alone in the sprawling antebellum mansion we had restored together. It was a beautiful, ghost-filled house with 12-foot ceilings and a history that seeped from the walls. Marcus had been a brilliant real estate developer, and he left me well provided for. I owned the manor, a block of commercial real estate on Magazine Street, and a substantial investment portfolio. I was lonely, yes, but I was content. I had my book club, my garden, and my memories. Julian, my only son, visited sporadically. He was a dreamer, a soft man who had inherited his father's charm, but none of his grit. He was 45, a failed architect who was always one lucky break away from greatness, or so he claimed. Serena was new. They had been married for only 2 years. She was a pharmaceutical sales representative, a woman who spoke in metrics and quotas. I never liked her. There was something hollow about her, a vacuum where empathy should have been. But Julian seemed happy, or at least he seemed managed, and I wanted him to be happy. The trouble began around my 72nd birthday. Julian and Serena came for dinner, and the conversation took a turn that, in hindsight, was a carefully rehearsed script. They talked about the crime rate in New Orleans. They talked about the maintenance costs of the manor. They talked about my isolation. "Mom," Julian said, swirling his wine, looking everywhere but at me. "We worry about you. This place is too big. You're rattling around in here like a marble in a tin can." I told them I was fine. I told them I had a housekeeper and a gardener. But they persisted. A week later, they showed up with suitcases. Their lease was up, they said. Their landlord was selling the building. It would just be for a few months, they said. Just until Julian's new firm took off. They framed it as them doing me a favor, providing company and security. I agreed because saying no to your child feels like a violation of nature, even when your gut is screaming at you to bolt the door. They took the east wing, the rooms that used to be the nursery. The first month was deceptively pleasant. Serena cooked healthy meals. Julian fixed the leaking faucet in the guest bath. But slowly, the atmosphere shifted. It started with small things, objects migrating. My reading glasses, which I always left on the nightstand, would appear in the refrigerator. The keys to my vintage Mercedes would vanish from the hook and turn up in the soil of my potted ferns. "Mom, you're getting forgetful," Julian would say with a pitying smile. I started to doubt myself. Was I? I had always prided myself on my sharp mind. I managed my own finances. I could recite poetry I learned in high school. But the evidence was mounting. One afternoon, I came downstairs to find the gas stove hissing, unlit. "Oh my God, Evelyn!" Serena shrieked, rushing to turn it off. "You left the gas on again! You're going to blow us all up!" I swore I hadn't touched the stove that day. I had been in the garden reading, but the look of terror on their faces made me apologize. I felt a creeping shame. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe the dementia that had taken my own mother was coming for me. Then came the isolation. My landline stopped working. "The technician is coming next week," Serena assured me, but he never came. She bought me a new smartphone, one of those complicated devices with a touch screen I couldn't navigate, and she kindly set up the parental controls to help me. Suddenly, I couldn't find my contacts. My emails wouldn't load. When friends called the house, Serena would answer. "Evelyn is resting," she would say. "She's having a bad day. Confused, you know." My social circle shrank. My friends stopped calling, assuming I was too ill to speak. I became a prisoner in my own home, guarded by a daughter-in-law who treated me like an unruly toddler. Julian, my sweet boy, watched it all happen. That was the knife in the heart. He would sit at the dinner table, watching Serena cut my meat for me, and he would say nothing. He would look down at his plate, shrinking into himself, letting her weave the narrative of my decline. The medical intervention was the next phase. Serena brought home a colleague, a Dr. Thorne. He wasn't my usual physician. He was a man with sweaty hands and shifting eyes who conducted a 10-minute exam in my living room and declared that I was showing signs of rapid onset cognitive decline. He prescribed a new regimen of pills, blue ones for the morning, yellow ones for the night. To stabilize your moods, Evelyn, he said. I took them. I trusted them. And that was my mistake. The pills made the world fuzzy. I slept for 12 hours at a time. I would wake up groggy, unable to form coherent sentences. I saw shadows in the corners of the room. I heard voices that weren't there. See? Serena would whisper to Julian. She's getting worse. But the human spirit is a resilient thing. Deep inside the fog, a spark remained. One night, about 3 weeks before the incident at the restaurant, I woke up thirsty. The yellow pill had knocked me out, but a vivid nightmare about drowning had jolted me awake. I needed water. I shuffled out of my room, my bare feet silent on the heart pine floors. As I passed the library, I saw a sliver of light under the door. I heard voices. We can't wait another 6 months, Serena was saying. Her voice was sharp, devoid of the saccharine sweetness she used with me. The market is peaking now. The developer wants the land for the new condos. If we don't sell the manor by June, the deal collapses. But she's still here, Julian mumbled. Barely, Serena scoffed. She's a vegetable, Julian. Thanks to the cocktail Thorne gave us. Look, we need that money. Your gambling debts aren't going away. Do you want your kneecaps broken? Do you want to go to prison? Because that's where we're headed if we don't liquidate her assets. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp. Gambling debts. Liquidate. We just need her to sign the power of attorney, Serena continued. Once we have that, we can move her to Street Jude's, the state facility. It's free. Street Jude's. It was a warehouse for the dying, a place of urine, smells, and neglect. They weren't planning to care for me. They were planning to discard me. She won't sign it, Julian said weakly. She's stubborn. She will if she's declared incompetent, Serena said. And if she has a psychotic break, if she attacks one of us, or if she accidentally overdoses, it happens all the time with dementia patients. It's tragic, but expected. I backed away slowly, my heart thundering so loud I thought it would shake the house. I retreated to my room and locked the door. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling the chemical fog in my brain war with a cold, hard rage. They were erasing me. They were rewriting my life story into a tragedy of senility so they could cash out. The next morning, I began to fight back. I knew I couldn't confront them directly. I was too weak, and they controlled everything. I had to be smarter. I stopped swallowing the pills. I would tuck them under my tongue, drink the water, and then spit them into a tissue the moment I was alone. It was agony. My body went into withdrawal. I had shakes, sweats, and headaches that felt like lightning strikes. But by the 3rd day, the fog began to lift. I could think again. I could remember where I put my keys. I realized I hadn't been forgetting things. Serena had been moving them. I needed allies. My sister Matilda lived in the Bywater. We had drifted apart years ago over a silly argument about our mother's silver service, but she was the toughest woman I knew. I waited until Serena went to work and Julian passed out on the sofa after a midday drinking session. I found an old prepaid burner phone I kept in a hurricane emergency kit in the pantry, one thing Serena had missed. I dialed Matilda's number. She answered on the 2nd ring. Hello? Matilda, it's Evelyn. Don't hang up. Evelyn? You sound lucid. Serena told me you didn't even know your own name anymore. Serena is a liar, I whispered, keeping an eye on the sleeping form of my son in the next room. They are poisoning me, Maddie. They are trying to steal the house and put me in Street Jude's. I need help. There was a silence on the line, heavy and pregnant. Then Matilda's voice came back, hard as granite. I'm coming over. No, I hissed. You can't. If they know I'm lucid, they'll accelerate their timeline. I need a lawyer, someone vicious, someone who eats sharks for breakfast. I know a guy, Matilda said. Leo Vance. He's young, hungry, and he hates bullies. I'll bring him to the back garden gate tonight at midnight. Can you get out? I can try. That night was the longest of my life. I feigned confusion at dinner, letting soup dribble down my chin, watching Serena's eyes gleam with triumph. At midnight, I crept through the kitchen, unlocked the French doors, and slipped into the humid darkness of the garden. Matilda was there, looking older but fierce, standing next to a young man in a leather jacket who looked more like a musician than a lawyer. Leo Vance didn't waste time with pleasantries. He listened to my story, recording everything on a device. He took the bag of spit-out pills I had saved. "This is attempted murder, Mrs. Beauregard," Leo said, his voice low and intense. "We can go to the police now." "No," I said. "If we go now, it's my word against theirs. They have a doctor on their payroll. They have months of manufactured evidence of my insanity. We need irrefutable proof. I want to catch them in the act. I want to destroy them." Leo smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression in the moonlight. "I like your style. Here's what we do." We spent the next week building a trap. Leo gave me a tiny camera disguised as a brooch and a voice recorder the size of a stick of gum. I wore them everywhere. I recorded Serena berating me. I recorded Julian crying on the phone to his bookie, begging for more time. I recorded Dr. Thorne writing false reports. But we needed the final nail in the coffin. We needed them to make their move. That brings us back to the restaurant. The lunch was supposed to be the final act. Leo had discovered that Serena had forged a new will and a transfer of deed. She needed me dead, or incapacitated enough to be hospitalized, to trigger the clauses she had inserted. The tea was the weapon. After my escape from the restaurant, I went straight to Matilda's house. Leo met us there. He was pale. "They just called the police," Leo said, looking at his phone. "They reported you missing. They said you had a psychotic episode at lunch and ran off. They're playing the dementia card hard." "Good," I said, smoothing my skirt. "Let them play. It's time to flip the board." We arranged the meeting for 2 days later. Leo contacted Julian and Serena, posing as a court-appointed advocate. He told them I had been found wandering and confused, but that I was currently safe at a private clinic. He told them that in my lucid moments, I had agreed to sign over the power of attorney to settle the matter once and for all. He invited them to his office to finalize the paperwork. They took the bait. "Greed makes people stupid," Leo had said, and he was right. On the morning of the meeting, I dressed in my finest suit, a cream-colored Chanel replica that made me look like the matriarch I was. I fixed my hair, I put on my pearls. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who had walked through fire and come out made of steel. Leo's office was in a high-rise downtown. Matilda, Leo, and I sat in the conference room. We had also invited 2 silent guests, Detective Broussard from the New Orleans PD and a representative from the district attorney's office. They waited in the adjoining room, watching through a monitor. Serena and Julian arrived, looking flushed with victory. Serena wore black, appropriate for the morning she anticipated. Julian looked sick, his skin gray and clammy. They walked in, and for a moment, they didn't see me. They only saw the paperwork on the table. "Thank God," Serena sighed, dropping her bag. "Is it done? Where is she? Is she sedated?" "Please, have a seat," Leo said smoothly. They sat. Then I turned my chair around from where I had been facing the window. "Hello, Julian." "Hello, Serena." The blood drained from Serena's face so fast I thought she might faint. Julian made a sound like a wounded animal. "Mom," Julian whispered, You look." "I look like myself," I said calmly. "I look like the woman who raised you. I look like the woman whose house you live in. I look like the woman you tried to poison on Tuesday." Serena recovered first. She stood up, her eyes narrowing. "This is a trick. She's not competent. She needs to be in a facility. She's dangerous." Leo pressed a button on his laptop. The screen on the wall flickered to life. It was a video from the hidden camera in my brooch. It showed Serena in the kitchen, grinding pills into my morning oatmeal. The audio was crisp. "Just eat it, you old hag, and go back to sleep so we can live our lives." Serena froze. Leo clicked to the next file. It was the audio recording from the library. "Do you want your kneecaps broken? We need to liquidate her." Julian put his head in his hands and began to sob. And finally, Leo produced a lab report. We had the tea glass tested, Serena. The woman at the next table? She wasn't just a toxicologist, she was a witness. The substance in the tea was a concentrated sedative mixed with arsenic. Low dose, cumulative. You weren't just drugging me. You were slowly murdering me. The door to the adjoining room opened. Detective Broussard stepped out, handcuffs gleaming in the fluorescent light. Serena Evans, Julian Beauregard, you are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, and elder abuse. Serena screamed. It was a primal, ugly sound. She lunged across the table, not at me, but at Julian. You idiot! You weak, pathetic idiot! You said she was stupid. You said she wouldn't notice. Julian didn't fight back. He just wept, a broken man-child who had gambled his soul and lost. As the officer cuffed Serena, she looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. You'll rot alone in that big house, Evelyn. No one loves you. You're a selfish old witch. I stood up, leaning my hands on the mahogany table. I looked her dead in the eye. I would rather be alone in a house full of ghosts than live with a monster. They dragged her out. Julian was next. He stopped at the door and looked back at me. His eyes were red, rimmed with the exhaustion of his own guilt. Mom, he choked out. I'm sorry. I was scared. Rocky, the bookie, he was going to kill me. I looked at my son. I saw the toddler I had nursed through fevers. I saw the boy I had taught to ride a bike. And I saw the man who had watched his wife poison his mother's tea. Fear explains it, Julian, I said softly. But it doesn't excuse it. You had a choice. You chose money over my life. Mom, please. Don't call me that, I said, my voice cracking for the first time. Not today. Maybe not ever again. You need to go now. When the door closed, silence filled the room. Matilda reached over and took my hand. Leo exhaled a long breath. It was over. I had won. But as I sat there, surrounded by the evidence of my victory, I felt a profound hollowness. I had saved my life, but I had lost my family. The trial was a sensation in the local papers. The Garden District poisoning plot. Serena was sentenced to 25 years without parole. The judge called her a predator of the worst kind. Julian got 10 years. His cooperation in the end helped reduce his sentence. But the betrayal was a stain that no prison term could wash away. I visited Julian once in prison, about a year after the sentencing. We spoke through the glass partition. He looked older, thinner, but sober. He told me he was taking art classes. He told me he was sorry. I told him I forgave him, because holding on to hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, and I had had enough poison for one lifetime. But I also told him that forgiveness does not mean restoration. The trust was ash. We could not rebuild a house on a foundation of ash. In the aftermath, I made changes. I sold the commercial properties on Magazine Street. I didn't need the stress. With the money, I started the Beauregard Foundation. We specialize in legal aid and advocacy for the elderly. We help people who are being financially exploited by their families. We help them find their voices when everyone else is telling them to shut up and fade away. I hired Leo as our lead counsel. He's like a son to me now, the kind of son who respects my strength rather than coveting my checkbook. Matilda moved into the east wing of the manor. We spend our evenings drinking bourbon on the porch, listening to the cicadas, arguing about politics and remembering the old days. The house isn't lonely anymore. It's filled with the energy of the people we help, the staff we employ, the life we have chosen to build. I am 74 now. My hips hurt when it rains, and I need reading glasses to see the menu. But I have never felt more alive. I want to leave you with this. There is a terrible misconception in our society that as we age, we become less relevant, less sharp, less human. We are treated as burdens, as obstacles to inheritance, as children to be managed. But age is not a erasure, it is an accumulation. We are the sum of every battle we have fought, every heartbreak we have survived, every lesson we have learned. If you are reading this, and you feel that shadow creeping over you, if you feel someone taking away your agency, checking your bank accounts, silencing your voice, do not go gently. Do not accept the narrative that you are losing it. Trust your gut. That bitter taste in your mouth? It might be almond, it might be poison. But it might also be the taste of your own power, waiting to be swallowed, waiting to fuel the fight of your life. You are the author of your story until the very last page. Don't let anyone else hold the pen.